Elon Musk has gotten a lot of flack for things he'd said on Twitter. But what he's not getting enough flack for is his ignorant comments on China. Welcome to China Uncensored, I'm Chris Chappell. So Elon Musk styles himself as a champion of free speech. He claims to be a free speech absolutist. And to hear him tell it, he doesn't censor himself, even when money is on the line.
I'll say what I want to say, and if the consequence of that is losing money, so be it.
Okay.
Recently, when a number of companies pulled advertising from X in response to Musk agreeing with what they claimed was an anti-Semitic post, he had this to say.
Don't advertise.
You don't want them to advertise?
No.
What do you mean?
If somebody's going to try to blackmail me with advertising, blackmail me with money, go f*** yourself.
And when he decided last week to reinstate Alex Jones on X, he said, "Are we a platform that believes in freedom of speech or are we not? And that principles matter more than money." Well, that all sounds great. And in many ways, X has become a much more free speech friendly place since Musk took over. But there are plenty of signs that his free speech absolutism stops at the Chinese border. Recently, Musk was asked if he's being hypocritical by doing business in China, considering his stance on free speech.
And how do you feel about, some people would say, is it hypocritical for you to be doing business in China, or frankly in other countries as it relates to X and other things that don't follow this free speech path that you have espoused?
Listen to how he dodges that question.
Well, first of all, Starlink and SpaceX are no business in China whatsoever. Tesla has one of four vehicle factories in China. And China is, a quarter of our market or something like that. And so it's a quarter of the market of one company. The same is true, by the way, of all the other car companies.
Okay, so only one of your companies does business in China. It still does business in China, which is led by a repressive regime. That doesn't sound very much like free speech absolutism. Also, according to China Passenger Car Association, China accounts for more than half of Tesla's global sales. So China isn't just a fraction of the sales of one of his companies. If Tesla couldn't sell to the China market, it would sink Tesla, which could explain Musk's lackluster answer. In addition, Tesla has been winning various concessions from local Chinese authorities, ranging from approvals to preferential loans. And let's not forget the tax breaks and Chinese government subsidies that he's gotten there. It sounds like a little teeny bit more than just, hey, Tesla does some business in China. Further, other car companies may do business with China, but they aren't led by self-styled free speech absolutists, so they don't have to worry about whether or not they're being hypocritical. Musk goes on.
I can only do things that are within the bounds of the law. I cannot do beyond that. My aspiration is to do as much good as possible and to be as productive as possible within the bounds of what is legal.
The last time I checked, it's perfectly legal to simply choose not to do business in China. But Musk has gone farther than most other companies in normalizing China's crimes against humanity. Last year, Tesla opened a showroom in Xinjiang. The US and several other countries have accused the Chinese government of committing genocide in Xinjiang, so opening a showroom there looks a lot like whitewashing China's crimes. Musk was also one of the business leaders who glad-handed with Xi Jinping during a dinner at APEC this year. But it's not just the way Musk dodges responsibility for doing business in China. Musk has also said a number of things that are not only untrue, but that are straight out of the CCP's propaganda book. I'll tell you what he said in a minute. But first, when it comes to the news, you want to make sure you're getting all the news from multiple perspectives. Like when it comes to Elon Musk. There's a lot of different perspectives about him and his companies, which is why I used ground news to see how he's being covered across the political spectrum. Recently, after all those advertisers pulled out of Twitter, there's been this story about how Elon Musk supposedly promoted the Pizzagate theory. Ground News shows how 24 different articles are covering it, but most of them lean left on the political spectrum. It's interesting to see how the narrative differs depending on the source. The left emphasizes the controversy surrounding Musk's posts and their promotion of conspiracy theories. In contrast, the right focuses on the resurfacing of debate about the Pizzagate controversy. You can also see more about the media covering that story. For example, how the Washington Post is owned by billionaire Jeff Bezos, has mixed factuality, and leans left. This kind of context is why I use ground news, to see how topics are being covered by sources around the world, sources that may have conflicting motives, like to hurt a rival billionaire. Ground news is on a mission to hold the media accountable and provide context so we can see how media narratives can easily shape public opinion. It's a great place to go if you want to be more informed than the average newsreader and find multiple perspectives that you might otherwise have missed. And it's also just really interesting to see all the hidden biases in the media. And that's why we're working with Ground News to sponsor this video, because we believe what they're doing is important. So sign up at ground.news/China or through my link below and get 40% off the Vantage level subscription for unlimited access. Do it now because this offer is only good for a short while. The link is in the description. And now, back to Musk's China mistakes. During the interview last month, not only did Musk dodge questions about doing business in China, but he also used CCP talking points. For example, when asked if he thought TikTok was a U.S. national security threat, here's what he had to say.
But do you think the Chinese government is using it to manipulate the minds of Americans?
No.
Is that something that you think we should worry about? I mean, you have different states that are trying to ban it.
I don't think this is some Chinese government plot.
Oh, but TikTok is being used by the Chinese government, and not in a good way. Just a few months ago, a former employee of ByteDance, which is the Chinese company that owns TikTok, said that the Chinese government spied on Hong Kong activists using TikTok. And this is on top of a mountain of other evidence that Chinese government censorship is alive and well on the platform. TikTok's algorithm was created by Chinese engineers, the same ones that created the algorithm for China's version of TikTok called Douyin. So it certainly can't be trusted. You can bet that if the Chinese government can tinker with the algorithm to, say, influence an election, it's going to try to do that. That's not all, though. Musk's comments on Taiwan were just as bad, if not worse. I'll tell you more after the break. Welcome back. So Musk was recently asked about how to avoid war over Taiwan. In his response, he cites the Thucydides trap, which is a theory that says there will always be war when a rising superpower displaces the current superpower.
So the United States has been the most powerful economic engine in the world longer than anyone's been alive. And the foundation of war is economics. So now we have a situation in the case of China where the economy is likely to be 2, perhaps 3 times larger than that of the U.S.
That's flat out wrong. First of all, even by official numbers, which China usually doctors, China's GDP is still behind the U.S. Now, before COVID, a lot of economists predicted China would overtake the U.S. within a decade. But now, a lot of economists are reversing their predictions because of major structural issues in China's economy that are now coming home to roost. Moody's recently downgraded China's credit rating from stable to negative because of all its debt. And the foreign investment, which China desperately needs to get its economy back on track, has been drying up. The government has resorted to silencing economists who give anything less than a rosy picture of the economy, which should give a pretty clear idea of just how bad China's economy is right now. So either Musk hasn't been paying attention, or he's self-censoring to curry favor with the Chinese regime. The other incredible claim he made recently was that China isn't interested in taking over other countries.
The good news, the history of China suggests that China is not acquisitive, meaning they're not going to go out and invade a whole bunch of countries. Now, they do feel very strongly, so that's good. I mean, because a lot of very powerful countries have been acquisitive.
Okay, so one of the first things the CCP did after taking over China was invading Tibet in 1950. Then, it twice attempted to invade Taiwan and failed. That was called the First and Second Taiwan Strait Crisis. In 1962, China invaded India. In 1979, China invaded Vietnam. Neither of those worked out great for China. Today, China has been illegally building entire villages inside the borders of its neighbor, Bhutan. And as recently as 2020, India and China both lost soldiers after China moved its troops past its de facto border with India. Also, in a map released earlier this year, China reopened a territorial dispute with Russia that had been a settled issue for years. And for decades, China has claimed almost the entire South China Sea, despite international law saying otherwise.
The country is embroiled in disputes with many of its Southeast Asian neighbors over the South China Sea. China claims nearly all of the sea as its territory, pointing to a 9-dash line that first appeared on Chinese maps in 1953. But the Philippines, Vietnam, Brunei, Taiwan, and Malaysia also claim parts of these waters as their own.
In addition, China told the U.S. it wouldn't militarize islands in the South China Sea that both China and several other countries claim. But then, a few years later, it did just that. Then there's the agreement China had with the UK over Hong Kong. China said Hong Kong could remain independent of the mainland for 50 years after the UK handed it over to China. However, after just 23 years, it simply took over Hong Kong. So when Musk says China hasn't been historically inquisitive, he's either really ignorant of history or he's playing dumb to appease his Chinese overlords. Now, Musk does acknowledge that China wants to take over Taiwan, which has been an independent country for over 70 years. But listen to how he frames it.
You know, from their standpoint, it would be like one of the states is you know, not there like Hawaii or something like that, but more significant than Hawaii, you know. And Hawaii is pretty significant for us.
Thanks for helping us better understand the communists, Elon. I wonder why you don't talk about Taiwan's standpoint. It's also bogus. Hawaii has been a part of the U.S. since 1959, and except for a small secession movement, it's not trying to be an independent country. Most Hawaiians like being American. Taiwan, on the other hand, does not see itself as part of China. Most people there identify as Taiwanese rather than Chinese, and their views of China are mostly negative. The main reason Taiwan isn't part of China is because the majority of Taiwanese people don't want to be part of it, and Taiwan is run completely independently. The CCP likes to say that the real reason Taiwan isn't a part of China is because the United States is keeping them apart, and Musk has echoed that idea.
So they view it as really that there's a fundamental part of China, the island of Formosa, now Taiwan, that is not part of China but should be. And the only reason it hasn't been is because of the U.S. Pacific Fleet.
But that's simply not accurate. It's true that the U.S. military is probably the main thing keeping China from invading, but saying that really distorts the dynamic. U.S. policy on Taiwan says that if Taiwan and China want to unite peacefully without any coercion or aggression, the U.S. wouldn't stand in the way. Like I said before, it's Taiwan's resistance to being part of China that is the real reason they're not one country. Musk has also said in the past that he thinks Taiwan should agree to become a special administrative zone of China to avoid a war. But he thinks that this special administrative zone would somehow be more lenient than Hong Kong. Since clearly leniency was the problem with Hong Kong, not, China going back on its promises. I don't think China's ever seen an agreement it didn't intend to break. Of course, Taiwan wasn't happy with Musk's solution to the situation. Taiwan's foreign minister hit back that Taiwan wasn't for sale. And because of Musk's comments on Taiwan, Taiwan doesn't trust him or his Starlink satellites to provide internet to the island in the event that China cuts its internet cables. That's why it's now working with a UK company to provide internet in case of a blackout. Not that China wants Starlink either. In fact, China's putting pressure on Musk not to provide internet to its citizens. Instead, it's trying to build its own satellite infrastructure to counter Musk's. So Musk doesn't care about the money. He says what he wants to say. Except when it comes to China. Then he becomes really careful. I wonder why. Now I got a video I want to show you. But first, check out this episode's sponsor, Ground News. Ground News is a great tool to help you stay well informed about what's happening in the world and how it's being covered by all sides of the political spectrum. Check it out at ground.news/China or click the link below. And here's that video I want to show you. It's about how you need to take personal responsibility and not blame everyone else for your problems the way a communist would. YouTube might consider that too controversial, which is why I'm hiding that message in video game content. This time about the disastrous release of The Day Before. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.